Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Musket Firing demonstration portion of your stay here. My name is Pete, and the weapon is called the Short Land Pattern Tower Flintlock Smooth Bore Muzzle Loading Musket. Of course, 200 years ago, nobody had the time nor the patience, I suspect, to say, "Hey, Pete, can you hand me my Short Land Pattern Tower Flintlock Smooth Bore Muzzle, please?" So instead, they reduced the name down to 2 words, ended up calling it the more popular Brown Bess. Brown for the obvious reason, it's a walnut stock, black walnut, just like the black walnut tree that you see standing beside us. Sorry, I didn't realize we do have another tour. And before I go any further, Suzanne has an announcement she's going to make. Okay.
C'est real fast.
So the weapon typically only had 2 names. The Brown Bess. Brown, again, for the obvious reason, the black walnut tree that you see standing beside us is the same wood that's used in these things, and when you treat it with linseed oil, it takes on that brown color. The Bess portion of the name has a Dutch derivative. There's a word boos or bus, B-U-I-S-E. It loosely translates into English as iron tube for shooting. That's where you get things like the blunderbuss and the arquebus, weapons from an earlier time period. In fact, if you recognize the name of an old cartoon character named Elmer Fudd, he liked to carry around the one with a big cone on the top of it, and that was the blunderbuss. And about 150 years after the blunderbuss was popular, it was streamlined or updated to this version, and the name gets anglicized from bus to bess. 3 main pieces make up the musket, and the Army buys those pieces separately from their makers, or they can buy them all together. Typically, they bought them separately. The pieces were sent to the Tower of London individually, pieced together into a completed package, and handed over to the soldier as such. So rather famously, the soldier received his weapon, lock, stock, and barrel. Now the moving pieces on the lock, you've got a frizzen, nothing more than a hardened piece of steel. Its main job is to hold the gunpowder into the area below it, called the pan. The other moving piece is the hammer, and the jaws of the hammer is affixed to flint. This is a stone that's hard enough to retain a sharp edge. Physically sharp enough to dig into and peel off from the face of the frizzen pieces of metal. At a high enough rate of speed, those pieces of metal form sparks. We hope. Those sparks fall down into the pan. We hope. That ignites the gunpowder you put in the pan. We hope. That ignition goes through a small hole on the side of the barrel. We hope. And that sets off the main charge. We hope. On a good day. There is a lot of hoping when firing one of these things. The British soldier, the American soldier, the French soldier, the Prussian soldier. Every soldier in the world recognized that their weapon had a misfire rate of 30%. So for every 10 times you pull the trigger, it's only going to go bang about 7 times. It sounds ridiculous, but I'll do my best to make sure this operates properly. Now, there are some prerequisites, things that you needed to have before you could join this army. Prior to 1811, you had to be 5 foot 6 inches tall, 16 years of age, and a male. Actually, the male portion of that was not always adhered to. We know of at least 2 females that disguised themselves and snuck their way into Wellington's army and fought very bravely against the Well, until they got injured and sent to the doctor recognized something was missing, they were asked to leave. But the height requirement, you can understand why they had a height requirement given the size of the weapon. Now, sadly, in the 20th century, we were all fed with the same line. And even more tragically, we insist on feeding the same line to our children. And what that is, oh, they were smaller back then. You see, I've been working here for about 33 years, and I don't know how many times I've seen people come out of the officers' quarters after seeing the camping cots that the officers brought with them, or even worse, the beds in the soldiers' barracks, which are 6 foot 2 inches long. Yet people always jump to the same conclusion. Oh, that's right, they were very small. Children, they were very small people. I mean, yes, people were smaller because McDonald's did not exist. No, they were not shorter. The average height of the human animals changed by that much. 1 1/2 inch in 200 years. If you went back 200 years in time, right now, no one would run screaming from the giants. If they came forward in time, you wouldn't think we were filling the world with a bunch of pygmies. Instead, we've only changed by that much. You have to go back 800 years before you'll start to see a sizable difference. I still get people going, wait a minute, I grew taller than my parents and grandparents. Explain that, smart guy. Well, I can. They shrank and so will you. It happens to us all. You also need to have at least 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 fingers, and a thumb. The Army's even going to check your face to be sure that you have at least 2 teeth. Now, the teeth, they would like to see on the right-hand side of the face, but no matter where the teeth appear, they must touch. Because if you want to be able to fire this weapon, you need to be able to open a cartridge, and that's one of these things here. Simply put, this is a paper tube, and it contains 110 to 120 grains of black powder, which is half the amount of gunpowder they were using 200 years ago. Gunpowder has improved in the 20th century, so we can use half. This is a blank round, obviously. It's a blue piece of paper. If it were a live round, it'd be a white piece of paper, and you'd see the big, fat, 68 caliber soft lead musket ball attached down here at the bottom. 68 caliber, 0.68 of an inch. Just to give you something to compare that with, movies and television talk about a 22. That's 0.22 of an inch, or 1/3 this size. Dirty Harry once said he could blow your head clean off with a 44. I wonder what a 68 would do. It's a massive projectile. Of course, we've chosen not to fire live ammunition because we noticed it cut down a repeat visitation. But the twist at the top is where the teeth come in handy. Because during the loading procedure, you're holding the weapon in the left hand. You don't have time to untwist it. And I can assure you, if you're missing the teeth, it makes for a lousy afternoon trying to gum your way through the paper. So you got to be able to bite open the top of the cartridge, pour some of the powder in the pan, close the frism to hold the gunpowder in tight, and then cast about. The rest of the powder, the paper, and the ball with the ball on top go down the barrel. Then, take the rammer out, seat the cartridge to the bottom, put the rammer back, and you're ready to fire. One shot. Well, I can see how impressed you are. So, hands up who thinks this weapon just plain stinks. This is the very last thing you'd want to have in a battlefield today, but 200 years ago, this is the machine gun of the day. Capable of firing at an astounding rate of 4, sometimes 5 times a minute. Wow. It doesn't sound like it's all that fast, so I'll give you something to compare it with. A rifle. For those who don't know, a rifle's an entirely different animal from what I'm showing you here. You can't call this a rifle. It's like calling a motorcycle a bicycle. Right? A motorcycle has a motor, a bicycle does not. A rifle has rifling, a musket does not. And what is rifling? A series of grooves on the inside of the barrel. Imagine a spiral staircase. It starts at the top of the barrel and winds its way all the way down to the bottom. That's going to cause the ball to come out with a spin, which, by the way, everything in the time period is a ball, which is why it's a study of ballistics, not bulletistics. When the ball is spinning, it's straight and true to its target, so highly accurate, you can pick off somebody dead between the eyes at 300 yards away. In fact, the Germans had already perfected the rifle. They were using it as far back as 1650. So almost 200 years prior to the War of 1812, they had highly accurate weapons that can get you to long distance. So why go with this? Speed. Yeah, cheaper and speed. You see, before you can get that ball to come out with the spin that makes it highly accurate, you've got to force it in with the spin that makes it highly accurate. And that's where you run into your big problems. Because when you load and fire a black powder weapon, you leave behind a substance called black powder fouling. It builds up all over the inside of the mechanism, all over the inside of the lock, the barrel and everything else. And what it does is it causes you to slow down in the loading process. Like the first shot out of a clean rifle takes 30 seconds to go through the process of loading, taking aim, shooting somebody 300 yards away. Congratulations, hope you get a trophy now. The second shot, though, is going to take you about 35 seconds because the fouling will slow you down. Now, 35 seconds doesn't sound like that much longer, but hey, people are shooting at you. Every second counts. Third shot, fourth shot, fifth shot, sixth shot. You're getting progressively slower. So much, well, when you're firing your highly accurate rifle 10 times, it's now going to take you 2 minutes to load and fire the 11th shot. And you can still claim to have the advantage because you can shoot me at 300 yards. Good for you. Because, well, I can run 300 yards in less than 2 minutes and poke you in the eye with my fingers. So, you don't need something that's that highly accurate. For the same reason, battlefields today are not filled with sniper rifles. Soldiers today carry semi to fully automatic weapons, machine guns, and the idea is get the bullets to go that way, and the bigger the spread pattern, the better. Same principle applies to this. This loads tremendously fast for the time period, but it's not that accurate. I'll give you an idea of accuracy. At 75 yards, I've hit a man-sized target 9 out of 10 times. Now, I was aiming center of mass with every shot, but one shot put them up here, one shot down there, one shot in the face. And frankly, you hit anything with a 68 caliber ball, it doesn't matter where you hit it. You've done your job. And you're currently sitting about 75 yards away from the palisade wall that finishes off this fort. At 30 meters, I was able to hit a target the size of my hat consistently. 30 meters is much shorter, from that end of the benches to that end of the benches. But most battles don't start at 30 meters or 75 yards, so I use the front gate as an example. The front gate is 240 yards away from where we are, and anyone could stand up there. I could stand back here and fire at them all day long, and the only injury I would do to them is maybe a hernia from laughing at me. What made these weapons quick to load had made them inaccurate. When the armies around the world had recognized that black powder fouling was not within their control, they all did the same thing. They decided to control the size of the ball and the size of the barrel it was fired out of. So that 68 caliber ball is flying out of a 75 caliber barrel. So the barrel's much bigger than the ball. And that gives you room for the fouling to grow. In fact, you can see some of the fouling in the paper here. So the fouling is going to get thicker and thicker and thicker, and you can fire this thing 60 times before the fouling slows you down to less than 4 shots a minute. Conversely, that's why the weapon was so inactive. The ball was made deliberately smaller, so it's going to load quickly and avoid this stuff. However, when it fires, it's going to bounce on the way out. So it may start down here, bounce once there, perhaps again up here, causing it to drift in this direction, that direction, up or down. So even if it traveled the 240 yards to get to the front gate, I'm going to miss my target, which looks like Craig today. I'm going to miss my target by about 18 feet in any direction. So, how do we shoot Craig? Well, if I gave everyone here a musket, we all stand, we all turn, we all fire at the same time, we're going to create a wall of lead flying down the field. Somebody, we don't care who, but somebody's going to hit him. And that's the idea behind linear tactics. That's why you had to line people up in long lines. Because a single weapon all by itself is stupid. But a whole bunch of weapons all packed together, that is effective fire. So I'm going to fire 2 rounds. The first round of load and fire will be a ceremonial loading and fire, where I talk you through the 13 steps that it takes to load and fire the musket. The second round will be a rapid fire, so to speak, where I try and get this thing to go off as quickly as possible. I'll make you a deal, though, as long as you guys promise to stay on this side of the pathway. I promise to stay on that side. Now I'm going to use the 1804 platoon loading exercise. Step by step procedure, you keep the soldiers out of the fire of the musket. You will see the steps the first time, but the second time I go through it, I'm going faster. So you may not see the steps, but they're all still there. If you wish to time me, I'd ask you time from the bang to the bang. And if everything works out okay, I should time it between 10 and 16 seconds. With blank cartridge, prime and load. So you move the musket to the right-hand side of the body, open the frizz to expose the pan. The next order is handle, cartridge. Reach back, grab onto a cartridge, and bite off the top. Prime, or some of the gunpowder in the pan. Close the frizz to hold the gunpowder tight and cast him out. The rest of the powder, the paper, and the ball, if there was one, now goes down the barrel. Take the rammer out and seat the cartridge at the bottom. Put the rammer back. In fact, I can't stress how important it is to put the ramrod back. Don't get me wrong, you can fire it, it makes an excellent projectile. It's just kind of an awkward weapon. Well, the awkward part is going across the field and asking for it back again. So, the harm happens. Make sure you have put it back, and if you leave it in the barrel, you're going to cause a shish kebab on the other side. Okay, ready? Set. Fire.
Oh, that was loud.
Now we should get a little noise from it. Trying to fix it.
It's fully conceivable that I can get dressed up in the best camouflage known to modern man today. I can paint my face. I can stick leaves and trees and rocks and things like that in my hat. I could hide in the field and look like a bush for days. But let me ask you, how many times would I be able to fire my weapon before somebody said, that bush just fired it? It's impossible to hide. One shot, the cloud of smoke says, hello, I'm right here. So the bright red suit was one of their better ideas. I've done it for a few reasons, and one of them was self-preservation. I'll explain. Most people are surprised by the amount of smoke produced by one weapon, but remember, that's half the amount of smoke that was produced by a musket 200 years ago. And one musket does not a whole battle make. Given the way the wind is moving today, if we put 100 men in the field behind it, and they fired, the smoke would move across us, and for a period of time, we would lose sight of each other at the distance we are right now, and that's 100 men. On Tuesday, the 27th of May, 1813, 6,000 American soldiers came to take this fort. They're certainly not all firing at exactly the same time, but imagine 500 giving fire. It created what became popularly called the fog of war. Where it gets so smoky, you can't tell the difference between the good guys and the bad guys, and frankly, that's kind of important. Friendly fire is not a new concept. You don't want to be shooting at your own guys. So yes, the Brits are famous for standing there in the bright red suits with, as we call them, the shoot me here cross belts and tall black hats. The Americans are standing on the other side of the battlefield all dressed up in bright blue suits with the shoot me here cross belts and tall black hats. The Hessians, the Prussians, the Spaniards, the French, the Swiss, the Dutch, the Portuguese. Every modern army wears brightly colored uniforms if they can afford it. They had to wear the cross belts because it holds on to their stuff. Later on in warfare, it's known as webbing, but you get all your ammunition on the one side and your bayonets on the other. The choice for the tall black hat was because it was the most fashionable thing to wear, but they're standing in those long lines, blazing away at each other, because everybody's using the height of technology, the musket. So my weapon is now safe. If you'd like to come forward and have a closer look at it, I am available for birthdays and bar mitzvahs. If you do have any questions, I can stick around for a while. But other than that, thank you very much for your attention.
That was all the shooters.